My husband always told me that when the time came to take up the fight against slavery, well, that would be the time for our separation. And I have always accepted his absences from home, although it has been difficult, especially when he went to Kansas. You see, our older boys went there to settle and start their own farms, but we heard there was going to be a fight to bring slavery into the new territory.
Well, I had to return to Ohio to close the brokerage, and I had to face some lawsuits brought against me by my business associates. So by the time that we were actually able to remove to North Elba, Congress had passed that Kansas-Nebraska Act, leaving slavery in the new territory an open question. Our sons considered it their sworn duty to join in the resistance. John Jr. wrote to me, drew a picture of the country as a wonderful open land, perfect for farming, raising stock. He begged me to join him in the struggle. He said that every slave-holding state from Virginia to Texas was enlisting hundreds and thousands of the meanest, most desperate of men, and arming them to the teeth, so that they might fasten slavery on glorious Kansas. He said, "Father, you must come at once and bring us weapons." You see, this was the sign I had been waiting for. It was not just my son calling me. No. In all thy ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths.
Oh, it was a very hard time for him to be leaving, what with the harvesting to be done and setting in supplies for the cold winter months, but the Lord's will be done. The Lord's will be done.
I rode into Kansas territory in a one-horse wagon, and I brought weapons, plenty of weapons. You see, I expected war to break out between the Free State settlers and the ruffians who had come across the border from Missouri to vote illegally in the territorial election. They stuffed the ballot boxes, stole the election, and this so-called election produced a bogus pro-slavery legislature, which then enacted a series of bogus laws legalizing slavery in Kansas. I was ready right then to buckle on my armor and give battle. Kansas Territory, April 7, 1856. Dear Mary, I wrote you last week enclosing a draft for $30. I would have sent you more, but, well, money is very scarce with me indeed.
My dearest husband, your letter of the 5th instant has been received, and we here are very much obliged for the money. We are middling well, and we are trying to use what means we have to be as economical as we know how. John, we're trying to keep out of debt.
But it may be that Watson can manage to get a little bit of money for shearing sheep.
Watson is not idle, I can tell you. He foddered until the middle of the month, and then he went to work for Sam Thompson, putting in his seed, which has hindered him from putting in his own.
Well, we have no wars yet, but we still have abundance of rumors. I, for one, have no desire to see the slave power cease their acts of aggression. Their foot shall slide in due time.
This money will pay up all of our debt, with some left over to buy leather to make shoes for the girls. You know, John, we haven't had any new shoes since we moved here, and I've had to make Ellen's this winter out of cloth.
No more now.
No more now.
May God bless and keep you all.
Your most affectionate wife.
At the end of May, we were called upon to defend Lawrence, Kansas, from an attack by the Missouri ruffians. And on our way, we learned that Lawrence had already been destroyed. The entire Free State settlement sacked and pillaged and partly burned by the slavers. You see, there had been these terrifying rumors that any day a pro-slavery army would sweep across the prairie, brutally murdering every Free State settler in Kansas territory. It seemed they weren't just rumors. They made repeated threats to exterminate all Free State settlers. That's right. Exterminate us. And they had already murdered 5. And I knew who the killers were. It was Dutch Henry, that tavern keeper, and Alan Wilkinson, who publicly vowed to kill me and my family and burn us out. And the Doyles. The Doyles, slave hunters from the Deep South. They arrived heavily armed with a team of bloodhounds. And we'd heard them all say we're going to stand and fight until every damned abolitionist is in hell. But first, we're going to annihilate those damned Browns. These men were radical, violent, pro-slavery killers who each had a perfect right to be hanged. But there wasn't a sheriff in the territory who would arrest them. And there wasn't a judge in the territory who would convict them. We had no recourse. We had to defend ourselves.
Rumors reach us that my husband has killed some of the border ruffians on Potawatomi Creek. But all his letters say is that he's been accused of the killings. And then we hear that John Jr. has been arrested for the killings. Well, they beat him, and then they force him to march 65 miles with his arms chained behind his back and his ankles chained. And then they throw him in jail where he goes mad for a while. Oh, he has recovered, but he has never ever taken up the fight again with his father.
Well, so at the end of the day, we went, my little army and I, we went under cover of night along the creek, calling it the homes of the Philistines. We pulled them out of their beds. And, well, we walked them outside, away from the houses. And my men exacted God's justice upon them with broadswords. We wanted to be silent. My son Jason, who was not with us, asked me later if I'd killed any of them myself. I answered truthfully. I said, no, I didn't, but I approved of it. God is my judge. We were entirely justified under the circumstances. Then after that, of course, Jason laid down his arms and withdrew from the struggle. But then in June, we won the great victory at Blackjack on the Osawatomie. God had not given us over to the will of our enemies. He had delivered them into our hands. It was the first regular battle fought in this civil war. God granted us the victory, even though we were greatly outnumbered. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy. But then, a couple of days later, we were forced to disband by federal troops. Oh yes, federal troops sent in by President Pierce to enforce the bogus laws. We had to escape from the ruffians' pursuit. We were like David of old, making our dwelling with the serpents of the rocks and the wild beasts of the wilderness. We were nearly destitute out there, but we were not disheartened. He delivereth me from my strong enemy and from them which hated me. The angel of the Lord encampeth round them that fear him, and delivereth them. But then they killed my son. Dear wife and children, everyone, I have one moment to write you to say that I am yet alive. However, on the morning of the 30th of August, an attack was made on the Osawatomie community by some 400 ruffians. Their scouts, being led by the Reverend Martin White, shot dead our dear Frederick. He had risen early that morning to feed the horses. Near as we could learn, he supposed them to be Free State men. God has seen it. God has seen it. Before I went to Kansas, I was not a violent man. I am not a violent man. But Kansas made me see things differently.